election workers are doing their very best to make sure there are no questions about the integrity of the results. Images of voting machines as they're being tested rigorously, and polling station workers making sure any possible quirks of the ballot don't spoil or raise questions about the vote. Now, here's one thing to note in Wisconsin. It's one of those states that could take a long time to count the ballots because they don't allow the counting of the absentee ballots until first thing tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., when the polls open for real. So that's something to watch in Wisconsin. Now, as we talk about the polls and the election workers, my next guest has been training hundreds of those workers right across the state. Her name is Melissa Kono. She's the town clerk for Burnside in northwest Wisconsin. Melissa, I'm delighted to have you on our program today. Thanks for being my guest.
Thanks for having me.
How's the stress level one day out, Melissa, first of all?
Through the roof. I think I speak for everyone in the U.S. and probably most of the world that we're just ready for it to all be over.
And what is causing that peak stress? What is it particularly?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is the preparation for it. Of course, tomorrow is the big day where we actually have to do the work, and it will be a long day. As you mentioned, polls open at 7 a.m. They close at 8 p.m. There'll be some counting that happens after that. And for those with a lot of absentee ballots, that can go into the night and into the next day. So tomorrow's really a lot of the work, but we've done a ton of work to prepare for tomorrow. We are inundated with ads and candidate visits and texts and phone calls. And I think it's just a lot of stress and a lot of tension. And we're ready for it to be over. Poll workers that I train are very concerned about, one, they want to make sure that they do a good job, that they're doing everything correctly and really on their A game, but also that they're concerned about criticism for just doing their job. And I think some of them too are concerned about are they going to be safe as poll workers on election day and after?
Can you pause right there? Because I was going to ask you, you said you're ready for it to be over, I'm sure. And from the sounds of things, you're ready. But I did want to ask you specifically about that because I mentioned you've been training, not just this time, you've been training for about a decade now. How is your training different this time? And what are you having to respond to in terms of questions and concerns?
Yeah, this time I really pivoted. So we focused on what was going to be most pertinent for tomorrow's election. The issues that I thought were going to, that election workers really needed to know the ins and outs of. And so, of course, there's always voter registration and photo ID and processing ballots. But what we also focused on is, what to do if there are observers in the polling place. Some places might call them poll watchers. And also what to do if somebody were to challenge a ballot or a voter, and how to handle that, how to handle conflict in the polling place, a disgruntled voter, even an irate voter, other types of emergencies like weather-related emergencies or fire.
You're training in de-escalation, Melissa?
Yeah.
For the first time?
That's a more recent thing. The Elections Commission did come out with a training this last year on de-escalation techniques. I know that there are places that have had law enforcement come in and train on de-escalation and also what to do in emergencies. I focus on threats to election workers, what constitutes a threat, then what to do about a threat, and then other emergency type situations.
Have you received, either personally or your workers, those you've trained, threats? Because we've certainly heard of very serious threats across the country, even death threats in some cases.
Yeah, and physical assaults recently on election workers. I and my workers have not experienced anything like that in my polling place, other than some comments that would maybe border on a threat when people question the integrity of the election or us as election workers. Other places I've trained in have had to call in law enforcement because there had been a disgruntled observer and some voter issues in the past.
Do you have law enforcement in position for your polls or even National Guard officers, anything ready to go in case?
Yeah, this year for the first time, we have worked with local law enforcement to have a presence throughout the day at all the polling locations in the county, and that's new this year.
How do you feel about that, having to take those measures?
Yeah, I can't believe it. 10 years ago when I started training, it never even dawned on me to include information like that or have to make a lot of my training involved around how to contact law enforcement or other emergency management, how to do that, when to do that. Before I just taught procedural things, how to make sure that a voter registration form was filled out properly and what documentation do voters need to bring. And, not at all focused on really sometimes serious emergency procedures that poll workers need to follow and like maintaining situational awareness at all times, that we have to always be on guard. And it's not just this fun volunteer activity where we get to, have coffee and chat with our neighbors, that it's a very serious job now, that we make sure that we do the job properly, but that we're always maintaining that situational awareness of anything that could happen. It's like these threats are so varied, it is really hard to prepare for them.
You said volunteer. That's an important thing to keep in mind. Volunteers who are wanting to do a civic duty here and participate in the electoral process. I mean, has this had any effect on your ability either to recruit this time or to keep the election workers that you've had in the past?
So I will clarify that they are technically not volunteers. They are appointed by the municipal body. Yeah,
but they do step
and they're
up.
paid.
Okay.
Yeah, they're paid, but it's a very low wage, so they do see it as a volunteer opportunity. It has been hard to recruit because there are people that I ask who I know would make excellent election workers, and they just don't. They would say to me, if you absolutely need me, I will, but I just don't want to. I did have a really excellent chief inspector who said, I don't want the pressure of that job anymore. And so I think that it has disincentivized good people from wanting to be part of the process. And also, I think at times, I always ask them about motivations when I'm training election workers. I give an evaluation and I ask what are their motivations for being a poll worker. And I do think there have been people who have become poll workers because they are maybe election deniers in a way, but I do think being part of the process, they've learned how it really works, and that they're more at ease at the process after going through the training of being an election worker.
So they were suspicious going in, maybe wanting to see what was going on really on the inside because there have been so many claims. Well, that is exactly what I wanted to ask you in terms of conclusion, because even just in these last days, we're hearing from the Republican side, notably, and Donald Trump in Pennsylvania last, concerns about voter fraud, electoral fraud. The only way that he will lose is if Democrats cheat. So these conspiracy theories and concerns about election integrity, when you hear them from either workers or people around you in Wisconsin, how do you answer them, Melissa?
Yeah, it is very frustrating because I certainly hear those comments a lot. I hear it from voters a lot. And what I say to counter that is, well, do you think I'm rigging the election? Do you think that that's happening here? And it's always, no, not here, but in other places. And usually those other places are more urban, if they're in the state of Wisconsin at all, or, in other states. And it is so frustrating to me to hear those type of comments from people who really don't understand how elections work. And it is exhausting to have to continuously educate on the misinformation that is out there. And I did more early voting this past week than I'd ever done in the past. And that was also kind of, I think, spurred by some misinformation about how the early voting process works, and that there was going to be like a flood of people on election day that weren't residents that were going to try to vote, and there would be long lines. And there's just nothing to substantiate that type of claim at all.
It is incredible what your role now entails. What an interesting conversation. Thank you very much for the time. When you said you're ready for it to be over, I understand you're coming to Canada for a couple of days to get away from it all afterward, up north in Ontario. Well, we will welcome you and hope a safe and sound and enjoy your break here when you're all finished. Thank you, Melissa. Really did appreciate the conversation, and all the best tomorrow.
Thank you.